Hello. I thought I'd do a very casual video, one which I haven't done much, a topic I haven't done much on before, about playing over chord changes and whether we can make the jump from playing diatonically, which means within the key, within the mother scale if you want to call it, within the group of notes where we take our chords from, or stepping out of diatonic playing and using notes that are, you could consider them wrong or just not in your initial scale. So we'll be playing well, I'll stick to, I'm actually, I've got a capo on, so I'm thinking A major. I'm thinking A major, but it's coming out the speakers B major, but what the hell, A, B. So if we have a very, very, very common chord progression in a lot of music, but particularly jazz, we have a chord 2 in our key of A or B, depending on whether you can afford a capo or not. If you can, put it on the 2nd fret. That's the one after the 1st. So our chord 2 is of course minor, because that's our default, isn't it? Chord 1 is major in a major key. Chord 2 is minor in a major key. And then we have chord 5, which is our dominant chord, a major chord. And if we make it a 4-note chord, that 4th note is a flat 7 above the root note of the chord. So that's our 2-5. Back to the 1. So 2. Sure, I won't do the passing, no rubbish. 2, 5, 1. 2, 5, which is dominant. We can call it 5-7 if you want. 5 dominant, 1. So what can we play over that? Well, in a 2 chord we can play any of the notes in the chord, and most people call those chord tones or notes in the chord. Is perfectly fine. So that 2 chord, I'm playing it as a minor 7, so we have 1, 3, 5, 7 in that chord. So any of those notes would work fantastic, considering they're already in the chord. 1, 3, 5, 7. That's pretty much the go-to choice of notes for a 2 chord, a minor 7 chord, because they're in the chord, of course. If we consider it a 2-9 chord, minor 9, we can consider the 9th in the chord to be a go-to note as well. At the end of the day, all the notes in the chord are perfectly fine to play. So it's harder to explain it than it is to play it, to be honest. What did I just play? 1, 5, 3, 2, 1. All the notes in the chord apart from the 7. I could add the 7. So any combination of those will be great. If you find a combination that sounds brilliant, we call that a nice melody. That's all subjective, I know. Sorry about little passing notes, it's such a difficult thing not to do. Yeah. Putting those little notes between the chord tones. Then over chord 5, again we've got notes 1, 3, 5 and 7 within the chord. These are chord tones, notes within the chord. So when you learn a chord shape, when you play a chord shape, it's really good to know all the notes in that chord, regardless of whether you're actually playing them or not. In other words, here, that's a standard bar chord, isn't it? Standard bar dominant chord. Bar, couple of fingers above it. So we have notes that we are actually physically playing. But what's important is to actually know the arpeggio within that chord. So instead of just holding down that shape and going, it's much more useful to actually know the 1, 3, 5, 7. 1, 3, 5, 7. And if we consider it a 9 chord, 1, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. However we call that chord. 9, 7, whatever. So if we can think of the arpeggio and the chord shape at the same time, we're not just actually stuck to the actual shape under our fingers. We can drop that shape and go. We can play. We're still only playing the notes in the chord, but we're playing the notes in the chord with a little bit more freedom than if we actually physically just hold down the chord and pick notes from it. Plus individual notes we can mute, can't we, after every note. We've got more control over those notes. So far we're just picking notes in the chords, aren't we? Which is called diatonic, because diatonic means in the key. So if our overriding key is A major, we're only picking notes within A major because chord 2 and chord 5 exist within the tonic chord. Sorry, the tonic that exists within the key. Okay, chord 2 and chord 5 by definition exist in the key of the 1 chord. The 1 chord has got the same name as the key. So in this case A major, and our 1 chord is A major. So after our 2, we can play the 1 chord. And that basically is the most common sequence in jazz music, and it's very common everywhere else as well. I mean, it's not very common in punk music, but what the hell. 2, 5, 1. And again with the 1 chord, if we just play the notes in the chord, if we consider the 1 chord to be a 1 major 7, which is normal in jazz music, or to get that soulful sound, we have notes 1, 3, 5, 7. 1, 3, 5, 7. If we consider it a major 9, again it's still diatonic, these are just notes from the key. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. 1, 9, 3, 5, 7, 1, 9, 3. We call note 2 note 9 because we normally stack our numbers in the chord 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. But that's exactly the same as saying 1, 2, 3, 5, 7. Exactly the same. It's just a verbal convention. But note 9 is note 2 by definition. Note 3 is note 10, note 7 is note 7, note 1 is note 8. So if we play a melody, just sticking with those notes, we could do some. I'm just picking notes from the chord. Over the 1 chord I sneaked in a little note 6, but note 6 sounds great over the 1 chord as well. At the end of the day, if it sounds good, then it must be good. We've all got the same sort of ears, really, one each side, bit funny looking, but yeah. We can consider the 1 chord to be a 1, 6. The 6th chord. Add the 6th note. We can even add the 6th note and the major 7. Pretty much all the notes really in the scale apart from note 4, which is a little bit of a hot note. From the chord we've got note 1, 5, 7, 3. Then from the 5 chord, note 1, 5, 7, 2 if you want, or 9. Then to the 1 chord, 5, 5, 5, 3, 1, 7. Again, just notes on the chord. If I consider that 2 chord to be a minor 9, I'm thinking the 3rd, the 2nd, which is the 9th, the 1, which is the 8th, the 7th in the chord, just notes in the chord, and then the 3rd of the 5th chord, but I could have picked any other note, the 7th, the 5th, even the 6th if I consider it to be a dominant 13 chord. And then back to the 1. There I'm playing note 1 or note 8 in the 1 chord. I'm playing it as a 6-9 chord, which is always very nice. Nice happy sound. Two. So these are just notes from the chord. Chord is a group of notes, we're just picking a note from it, and because it's being played in a melody, we're hearing the note more as an individual note than as a chord, because all these notes exist within the chord anyway. We're just sort of lifting it out, making it more obvious, putting it in the format of a melody, which is one note followed by another note, not overlapping in general terms. So we have a melody. Just a little melody. Then those are just chord tones. Just chord tones. Because we can consider these chords to be any type of chord that fits within the diatonic harmony we're thinking in. So the 2 chord can always be a minor, minor 7, minor 9, minor 13. Whatever we consider it to be, if it fits into the key, then that's fine, and those are the notes we can pick. So infinite amount of melodies can be made over these 3 chords. Well, pretty much infinite. We haven't got to the end yet, I don't think. Just by combinations of chord tones, which are notes in the chord, which are of course notes in the mother key as well. This is all diatonic. We're not going outside of our initial 7 notes in our key, in our scale. A scale is a key, by the way. We can avoid all the crap on arguments on the internet. A key is a scale and a scale is a key. The only difference is a scale is in number order. That's the only difference between a key and a scale. In a scale, we normally play it, not even then always, but we normally play it in number order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Or back down. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That is a key. That's a key. A scale is a key, played in number order. A key is a scale, not necessarily played in number order. That's it. We can use both words to mean 99% the same thing. So these notes are just in the key. We'll put it in again. apart from that little slide. Let's ignore those little slides, I can't help but do it. So we're playing 3 chords, all diatonic because they're in the key. We're playing melodies over the 3 chords, all diatonic because they're in the key. We're trying to pick notes from each chord. Even if we don't, it will still sound pretty much okay. There are more good notes than bad notes over a chord. And that's it. We could make melodies even simpler by picking notes that are jointly owned, like a joint bank account between 2 chords or even 3. So for instance, the 3rd in my 2 chord is the 7th in my 5 chord. So I could just play that note, couldn't I? That note is the 4th in our 1 chord, which is our avoid note pretty much. It's not a 4th, it's not going to sound very good. Over a major 7 chord, you can try it if you want. So most people would, if they want to play the nearest note, would drop that, what we now call a 4th in the 1 chord, down to the 3rd. And we all know that a chord has got a 3rd, so that's going to sound fine. So with those 3 chords, stay the same note, drop the note down. And then you've got a little sort of jazz melody. Very simple, and it might be fine. You know, put some decent lyrics to it. And we can do that for any of the notes in our chord. So any of the notes that are shared between 2 chords, we can stick on that note and avoid moving around too much if that's what we want to do. The tonic note, note 1 in the 2 chord, that also exists in the 5 chord. We could even keep that the same because that is note 9 in the 1 chord. There it is there. Note 1. So we've got 1 note over 3 chords because that note can exist in all 3 chords. It's not an avoid note, it doesn't sound bad. The 9th over the 1 chord sounds great. So wouldn't it be great if we could play those 3 chords like quickly and improvise over the top of it and literally play the same note? Well, yeah, it's pretty easy, as long as we know what the notes are in the chord. It gets more difficult if we don't know where those notes are in the chord, because we don't know what chords would share 1 note, for instance. But it's nice to know that to be able to look at a chord and to instantly know what notes are shared between the 2 chords. If I consider the 2 chord to be a minor 6th chord, I know that that 6th note is also the 3rd in the 5th chord, so we've got the same note is the 7th in the 1 chord. So but soon we're going to run out of notes that are shared between the 2 chords, aren't we? We can change the rhythm. We're going to run out of notes, so it's nice to be able to go a little bit beyond that. To be honest, it's nice to be able to play any combination of notes in your chord instantly without thinking too much, because we don't want to think too much. So with that 1 chord, again, it's still diatonic. So with the 2 chords, still diatonic. I'm still thinking chord tones. 5, 7, 3, 7. Over the 2 chord, and then 3, 2, 3, 1. I think that's what I played over the 5 chord. So mentally, the more combinations we can access, normally the more varied we can make our improvisation. As long as we don't end up thinking too much and it becomes all a bit too much. Again, we can consider all of those chord tones. 7 over the 2 chord, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 4, whatever I played, 5. We can consider our 2 chord to be a minor 11, which adds that 4th note. Can't remember what I played now, but the 3rd of the 5th chord will do. Or the tonic of the root of the 5th chord, and then the 7, or any of the other notes in the chord. So a decent guitarist should be able to play those 3 chords and be able to pick notes on the chord and put them in some sort of nice rhythmic framework by just thinking of something and then trying to pluck it. That's where we get rhythms from. We think of them and we try to play them. That would sound fine over the 2 chords. But what if we want to step out? What if we want to do some of those outside notes or whatever we want to call them? Not out the window, or not yet. We can add notes that are not in the chord and are not even normally ever put in the chord. In other words, in our 2 chord, our minor 7, we don't consider, for instance, the major 3rd to be in that chord, or we don't consider it to be in that chord. It's not in that chord. Yeah. But the rule is, in my book, is that we can play any wrong note as long as we don't hang around on it too long. Okay, if you think of a wrong note as maybe, and that note is pretty wrong. A wrong note is maybe a hot plate, and you can touch it very quickly with your finger, but you don't want to keep your finger there. You can touch it quickly and it's fine. Yeah. So even that wrong note, we can play. We can play fine. We certainly don't put it in the chord because that will change the chord. But as a melody, we can put it in fine. And the 2 chord is not even the chord where we put lots of wrong notes in general. We could do, but they are very wrong notes. If you hang around, they're not going to sound too good. La 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 sounds very wrong. La 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 sounds very right. It's the 5th chord, our dominant chord, where all the excitement happens. That's where all the fun of the fair happens. Because over a dominant chord, the chord tones sound great, of course, like in any chord. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, whatever. 6th even. Sounds great. But we can put chords that are, notes that are certainly not played in a dominant chord normally. Like we can put the flat 9 in. So as soon as we add stuff that's not in the chord, we call that non-diatonic. So we're outside of the key now. So if I add the flat 9 to that chord, which is there, it's sort of making it into a dominant flat 9 chord. But we're not actually thinking of a flat 9 chord, we're just thinking of a dominant chord, but we can put that note in. That note sounds... It is very common and it sounds pretty good over a dominant chord. Something about the nature of a dominant chord, you can add lots of notes to it. And even though they're not in the key, they sound great. So flat 9 is one of the most common ones. Sharp 9 is one of the most common ones. So that note is actually changing the nature of the chord by just adding one melody note. You don't have to be playing the chord at the same time. Just adding that note. We're changing the nature of that chord into what we call a dominant sharp 9. Sharp 9. What I played previously was a flat 9. So those two notes are very common over a dominant chord, particularly in a jazz frame of mind. 1, flat 9, sharp 9. Even if what's written on the paper or what we're thinking in our head is simply the 5 chord. Because over a 5 chord, if it's a 4-note chord, it is dominant. If we want to add a note, the flat 9 and the sharp 9 sound great. And they help with the resolution back to the cadence back to chord 1. Resolution means feels like it goes home, sort of thing. Adding those wrong notes, if you want to call them wrong. Can't really do quotes with one hand, can I? That gives it that jazz sound. Other notes that we can put over the 5th chord. We can put the flat 5 and the sharp 5. They're great as well. Flat 5. There it is. There's the flat 5. Again, sounds great over a dominant chord. So I'm thinking in terms of melodies here. I'm thinking as if you're playing single notes and you're improvising over a 5 chord. On top of the 1, 3, 5, 7, we've also got the flat 5. Even if the chord keeps its original 5, we can put that flat 5 in. In the chord, that's 1, 7, flat 5. Don't forget we added the sharp 9 and the flat 9 before. If we start putting these in combination, flat 5, sharp 9, flat 9, it gets very jazzy. And you guessed it, along with the flat 5 we can put the sharp 5 in. The sharp 5. Don't have to play the chord, but there it is in the chord. Now if we think of those funny notes over the 5 chord as a scale, 1, I'll do it backwards from 8 to 1. 8, 7, both these notes are in the chord. Sharp 5 or flat 6, same thing. Flat 5 or sharp 4. 3, sharp 9, flat 9, 1. So what I'm doing is I'm playing those funny notes, okay, in a 7-note scale. I'm not playing the normal 5 and I'm not playing the normal 9 because we've altered the 5 and the 9. So what we got there, by just altering the 5, flattening it and sharpening it and considering those to be separate notes, and altering the 9, flattening it and sharpening it to considering those to be separate notes, we've got what we call the altered scale. The altered scale, which is a very, very common, it seems, common scale to play over a dominant chord, because it's automatically got that flat 9 and sharp 9 and flat 5 and sharp 5 added into it. So it will immediately... it automatically sounds pretty jazzy. So over our chords we can also play scales. The only difference between a scale and a chord tones really is that when we play chord tones as individual notes, if that's not a contradiction in terms, is that a scale is normally 7 notes, 8 if it's a diminished scale, but normally 7 notes. You could consider those to be chord tones if you have 7 notes in a chord, but that's quite a lot of notes in a chord. But there you go. So 1, 2, how many notes have I? I'll start from the bottom and go up, it makes more sense. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 7 notes, isn't it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 actual notes, even though those are not the note numbers. The note numbers are, as we said before, 1, flat 9, sharp 9, 3, flat 5, sharp 5, 7, 8. If that's a bit complicated, well, it does sound a bit complicated because we've got flat 5s and sharp 5s all together. You know? I suppose we could call it 1 flat 9. Well, we've got to call that sharp 9 really. We could call it flat 3, but then we've got a normal 3, so we're going to be overlapping our numbers somewhat. We could call that a sharp 4, sharp 5. Then we don't have a 6 at all, unless we want to call that a sharp 6, but most people call that a flat 7. And then we've got the 8. So things get exciting when we play over that 5th chord in jazz. We've got all these notes that we can add. And of course we can combine those with the normal 5 as well and the normal 9. Yeah. So we can do any combinations. If it sounds good, it sounds good. Even if they're technically wrong. Even if the underlying chord doesn't have them in. It doesn't really matter. Plenty of good jazz stuff. It's technically wrong. That's why when you see a chord progression, it's much nicer to see 2, 5, 1. Rather than 2, minor 11, 5, sharp 11, 9, sharp 11, whatever, 13, sharp 11. That's a bit of a lot to take in with your eyes when you're playing quickly. Much nicer just to call it a 5 chord. We know it's dominant anyway. We know it's dominant. We don't have to outline what everything else that could be possibly played over it. And then we're in the 1 chord. 1 or 1 major 7. We can play it as a major 9, of course. We can play it as a major all sorts. But ultimately it's just a 1 chord. Don't forget we can stack up any notes in a chord as long as it sounds good. After the 1, 3, 5 we've got the 7, we've got the 9, we've got the 11, which can be a bit dodgy, depends on the context, and we've got the 13. 13 sounds great over a major 7 chord. So then we can do our little playing over the changes, but we can incorporate those funny notes in the 5 chord. So we'll be diatonic, probably, over the 2 chord. And And then we can get all jazzy over the 5 chord. And then we can come back to normal over the 1 chord. And then the 2 chord. Then the 5 chord. Those funny notes again. Then the 1 chord. And that's probably the easiest way to think when it comes to getting something to sound jazzy. Over the 2 chord we can stay relatively normal. Notes in the chord, or at least in the 2 mode, you know, Dorian, the 2 mode, which is the scale of the 2 chord. Over the 5 chord, we can put those extra altered notes in. Then over the 1 chord, we can come back to a bit of normality maybe. And those funny notes over the 5 chord will lead it, will make it resolve nicely because we've had those funny notes, and then we go back to where we feel not comfortable, but homely. Putting your head back on the pillow. There we go. So an easy way to start playing those funny notes on the 5 chord is to learn your altered dominant chord. Scale, as you were. Altered dominant scale. Now, if you can play the scale of the 5 chord, the scale of our dominant chord, which is Mixolydian, that's our 5 mode, mode 5, the mode of the chord. The chord is 1, 3, 5, 7 from the mode, 1, 3, 5, 7. We can play that, just a standard mode, Mixolydian mode. We can work out, it'd be good if you can work out that altered scale, starting with the Mixolydian. Because in the Mixolydian we've already got the 1, the 3 and the 7, which we're going to be playing anyway. But to play the altered scale we've got the flat 2, as said before, so 1, flat 2, sharp 2, flat 9 if you want, sharp 9. Then the 3, which is already in the chord, in our Mixolydian scale, but we're going 1, flat 9, sharp 9. And then the normal 3, we're adding 2 notes. We're adding 2 notes between note 1 and note 3. That's odd, isn't it? Instead of going 1, 2, 3, we're going 1, flat 2, sharp 2, 3. And then we're playing the sharp 4. Always think of it in terms of note numbers. Within the scale, within the chord, same thing. 1, flat 2, sharp 2, 3, which was already in the dominant chord initially. Sharp 4, or flat 5, but it's the same thing. Note 4 in the scale sharpened, or note 5 in the scale sharpened. And then we're not playing the 5, we're playing the sharp 5. 1, flat 2, sharp 2, 3, sharp 4, sharp 5, or flat 5, sharp 5, however you want to call it. And then after that, we don't really have a 6th, or we don't need to say the word 6. We can just say 7, which is already in the dominant chord and the Mixolydian scale to start with. Same thing. We're up to note 7, then note 8 of course. So an altered scale is just a normal 7-note scale. And then we get to the octave. It's nice to know those notes. Work them out. They're not that hard. Work them out. Know the note numbers within your chord, and then alter them to get the altered scale. That's it. That is pretty much it, really. We can use some mental exercises and stuff to maybe get those notes quicker in a playing context, using things like what we call flat 5 or tritone substitutions. But just to get the same notes, to be honest, to get those same notes, that's about as far as it gets when it comes to altered notes over a dominant chord. Even the diminished scale is not as complicated as the altered scale, because the diminished scale has a normal 5. The diminished scale is like just an altered, is like the dominant chord, but just with the flat 9 and the sharp 9 added. So it's sort of, it's like halfway towards the altered. It's got the flat 9 and the sharp 9. It's got the sharp 11 or sharp 4. You can call it a flat 5, but then we've got the normal 5. So. But then we've got a normal 6 as well. Then the flat 7. Then the 8. So the diminished scale, what we call half whole because it starts on a semitone above the root of the chord. The diminished scale is very common over chord 5 as well. But it's not quite as altered as the fully altered scale. And with those two, you cover pretty much everything, really. If you combine the original 4-note chord tones, we've got almost a whole octave, which is pretty much all there is, isn't there? All there is between note 1 and note 8 is all the notes in between. By definition, we've got all those. If we got all those, then that's it. There's no more. There's no more than all of them. All the notes in an octave, all 12 notes. But of course, what we do with them demands a little bit of musicality, a little bit of rhythm and some imagination, and not just copying what some other person did necessarily, or in a slightly different way, and not copying ourselves either, and doing it fluently, and doing quite a lot really, but at least these are the notes. It's nice to know roughly what notes you're going to go from, and then we can try to be creative with them afterwards. So that's how to play wrong notes, for want of a better word, or altered notes over a dominant chord, which is the chord where we play our most altered notes. Altered as in not in the original key. We can play those notes and not even know it. If we think of the 4 notes in our dominant chord, 1, 3, 5, 7. If we approach each note from underneath, we're actually getting the notes from the altered scale already. There's a sharp 9, which is the same as a flat 3, 3, underneath the 3. Under the 5, we've got the flat 5, of course, by definition. So if you just approach each note underneath it, underneath the 3, we've got the flat 3. Underneath the 5, we've got the flat 5. So we're already, if we do that little note underneath bit, we're automatically getting our altered notes already, whether we know it or not. automatically sounding a little bit jazzy already. We're not even really thinking about what the hell the notes are. We're just playing a note one semitone below. It sounds pretty good to me over a dominant chord. That went on for a bit. Time for a coffee.